The screams echoed across the desolate plains of Wyoming Territory as Wade Cooper rode up to the smoldering remains of what once had been a modest homestead, his hand instinctively reaching for the Colt revolver at his side. It was 1878, and the unforgiving landscape of the West had claimed yet another victim, or so he thought until he spotted movement among the ruins. Wade dismounted his chestnut mare, cautiously approaching the dilapidated structure. The acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air, mingling with the distinct metallic scent of blood. Two bodies lay motionless near what had been the front door, a man and a woman, both riddled with arrows, likely the handiwork of a Sioux war party that had been causing trouble in these parts for months. "Hello?" Wade called out, his voice carrying across the silent plains. "Anyone alive in there?" A soft whimper answered him, followed by the appearance of a young woman no older than 20, her face smudged with soot and tears, clutching a small child of perhaps 3 or 4 years to her chest. Behind her cowered another child, this one around 6. "They killed them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They killed my sister and her husband." Her eyes, a startling shade of green even through her tears, met his. "Please don't leave us," she begged, her knuckles white as she gripped the toddler tighter. "They might come back." Wade Cooper had been drifting for 5 years since the war, never staying in one place longer than it took to earn enough money for supplies and whiskey. He had obligations to no one and preferred it that way. But something in the woman's pleading gaze made him hesitate. "What's your name, miss?" he asked, tipping his hat back to reveal his weather-beaten face. "Hannah," she replied. "Hannah Powell. These are my niece and nephew, Sarah and Thomas." Wade glanced around at the desolate landscape, knowing the nearest town was a good day's ride away. Night would fall soon, and with it, the dangers of the open country would multiply. "I reckon I could stay until morning," he said finally, sitting down on a charred wooden beam. "We'll head to Big Horn at first light." Hannah's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." What Wade couldn't know as he unsaddled his horse and began gathering wood for a fire was that his decision to stay that night would alter the course of his life forever. The children fell asleep quickly after Wade had managed to prepare a meager meal from his supplies. Hannah sat across from him at the small fire he'd built a safe distance from the ruins, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "You're not from around here," Wade observed, his voice low to avoid disturbing the sleeping children. Hannah shook her head. "I came from Boston 3 months ago when my sister wrote that her husband had taken ill. I was to help with the children until he recovered." She glanced at the covered bodies Wade had respectfully moved away from the house. "He had just gotten back on his feet when—" Her voice trailed off. Wade nodded, understanding her unspoken grief. "The Sioux have been restless since the government started pushing them off their lands. This homestead is too isolated." "What about you?" Hannah asked, changing the subject. "Where are you headed?" Wade shrugged. "Nowhere in particular. I was making my way to Montana Territory. Heard there's work there for a man who knows horses." "You fought in the war?" Hannah asked, noticing the faded Confederate jacket he used as a saddle blanket. "I did. Virginia Infantry. Been wandering ever since." Wade didn't elaborate on the horrors he'd seen or the nightmares that still plagued him. Some things were better left unsaid. "I'm sorry for imposing on you," Hannah said softly. "But I'm grateful you came along when you did." Wade met her gaze across the fire. "Get some rest, Miss Powell. We've got a long ride ahead of us tomorrow." As Hannah curled up beside the children, Wade kept watch, his Winchester rifle across his lap. He found himself studying her face in the firelight, the delicate curve of her jaw, the strength evident despite her exhaustion. It had been a long time since Wade Cooper had felt protective of anyone but himself. The journey to Big Horn the next day was slow and arduous. Wade had only one horse, so they took turns, Hannah riding with little Thomas in her arms while Wade walked alongside, leading the horse with Sarah perched in front of the saddle. "My sister Elizabeth wrote about Big Horn," Hannah said as they crested a hill that revealed the town in the distance. "She said the people were kind?" Kind enough, Wade replied. Though they might not take kindly to a stranger bringing trouble to their doorstep. Hannah's face fell. The Sioux think they might follow us? Wade shook his head. Not likely. They've got what they wanted from that homestead. But folks around here are wary of outsiders, especially those connected to Indian attacks. As they approached the town, Wade noticed Hannah straightening her shoulders, trying to make herself presentable despite her disheveled appearance, and the tragedy that hung over her like a shadow. Bighorn was a typical frontier town, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a saloon, a general store, and a small church at the far end. People stopped to stare as Wade led his horse down the dusty thoroughfare, Hannah and the children drawing curious glances. Sheriff's office is there, Wade said, nodding toward a building with a wooden star nailed to the door. He'll need to know about what happened. Sheriff Frank Thornton was a grizzled man in his 50s who listened to their story with a grave expression. Been 3 attacks like this in the last month, he said, shaking his head. Government's stirring up trouble with these treaties, and honest folk are paying the price. Is there somewhere in town the lady and children can stay? Wade asked, already thinking about how soon he could be on his way. The sheriff rubbed his chin. Widow Morgan runs a boarding house. She might take them in, especially with the young ones involved. As for you, Cooper, I'll be moving on once I've seen them settled. Wade interrupted. Just doing my Christian duty. Hannah's eyes darted to his face, a flicker of something disappointment, perhaps crossing her features before she composed herself. The Widow Morgan's boarding house was a 2-story clapboard building with lace curtains in the windows and a well-tended garden out front. The widow herself was a plump, pleasant woman in her 60s who took one look at Hannah and the children and ushered them inside without hesitation. You poor dears, she clucked, leading them to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. We'll get you sorted right away. A hot bath, some fresh clothes, and a proper meal, that's what you need. Wade lingered awkwardly in the doorway, his hat in his hands. Well, I reckon this is where I leave you, Miss Powell. Hannah turned to him, the toddlers still clinging to her skirts. Mr. Cooper, I don't know how to thank you. No need for thanks, Wade said gruffly. Anyone would have done the same. Not anyone, Hannah replied softly. Sheriff Thornton said as much. Most men would have ridden on, not wanting to get involved. Wade shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. I should be going. Daylight's wasting. Little Sarah, who had been silent for most of the journey, suddenly darted forward and clutched at Wade's leg. Don't go, she whimpered, looking up at him with eyes red-rimmed from crying. The bad men might come back. Wade gently disentangled the child's fingers from his trouser leg, crouching down to her level. You're safe here, little one. Sheriff Thornton and Mrs. Morgan will look after you now. The child's face crumpled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Hannah moved to comfort her, but the girl turned and buried her face in Wade's chest instead, her small body shaking with sobs. Wade froze, unaccustomed to such displays of emotion. His hand hovered uncertainly over the child's head before finally coming to rest on her hair. Please don't leave us, Sarah sobbed, her words muffled against his shirt. Please! Wade looked up to find Hannah watching him, her own eyes swimming with unshed tears. Even little Thomas had stopped his fidgeting and was staring at Wade with solemn eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside Wade Cooper. He had spent years drifting, outrunning the ghosts of his past. But here, in this small room with its faded wallpaper and creaking floorboards, he felt a strange tug as if invisible threads were attempting to bind him to these people he barely knew. I suppose I could stay in town for a few days, he heard himself saying. Just until you get settled. The relief on Hannah's face was immediate and profound, making Wade wonder just how frightened she had been at the prospect of being left alone. Wade found lodging at the local saloon, a rowdy establishment that rented rooms by the night to cowboys and drifters. He told himself it was just for a few days, time enough to make sure Hannah and the children were properly settled and that the Sioux war party wasn't tracking them. But days stretched into a week, and Wade found himself falling into a routine. Each morning, He would check in on Hannah and the children at the boarding house. He began helping Hannah navigate the complexities of her new situation, accompanying her to the bank to inquire about her sister's affairs, assisting with funeral arrangements for Elizabeth and her husband, and even helping her file paperwork to become the children's legal guardian. "You've been very kind, Mr. Cooper," Hannah said one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch after the children had been put to bed. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Wade shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Just doing what needs doing," he mumbled. Hannah studied him in the fading light. "May I ask you something personal?" Wade hesitated, then nodded. "What are you running from?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I'm running from something?" Hannah's smile was gentle. "A man doesn't wander aimlessly for years unless he's either searching for something or fleeing from something." Wade was silent for a long moment. "Maybe a bit of both," he finally admitted. "After the war, I went home to Virginia. My family's farm had been burned to the ground. Parents both dead. Nothing left for me there." "I'm sorry," Hannah said softly. Wade shrugged. "War changes a man. Makes him see things differently. I couldn't settle back into ordinary life after what I'd seen. So I headed west." "And have you found what you're looking for?" Hannah asked. Wade looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. In the twilight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her face softened by the evening shadows, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. "Not yet," he said quietly. "But I'm starting to think maybe I've been looking in all the wrong places." The atmosphere between them shifted, charged with something Wade couldn't quite name. Before either could speak again, the door opened, and Mrs. Morgan appeared. "Miss Powell, Sarah's asking for you. Says she had a bad dream." Hannah rose immediately. "I should go to her." "Good night, Mr. Cooper." "Good night, Miss Powell," Wade replied, watching her disappear into the house. As Wade walked back to the saloon that night, he found himself conflicted. The pull he felt toward Hannah and the children was undeniable, but so was his instinct to keep moving. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability was something Wade Cooper had sworn off long ago. The next morning, Wade made a decision. He would leave Big Horn before he became any more entangled in Hannah Powell's life. It was better this way for all of them. He saddled his horse early, intending to slip out of town without goodbyes. But as he led the animal down the main street, he found his path blocked by Sheriff Thornton. "Heading out, Cooper?" the sheriff asked, eyeing Wade's packed saddlebags. Wade nodded. "Time I moved on." Thornton studied him for a moment. "Heard about what happened to those folks at the homestead. Nasty business. Miss Powell seems to be holding up well, considering." "She's a strong woman," Wade agreed. "Strong but vulnerable," Thornton said pointedly. "Two young children to care for, no family, limited funds. Big Horn's a decent town, but it's still the frontier. Not easy for a woman alone." Wade frowned. "What are you getting at, Sheriff?" "Just making conversation," Thornton replied innocently. "Though I did hear that Jeb Harkins has been showing interest in the widow's boarding house. Been bringing Miss Powell flowers, offering to help with the children." Wade's grip tightened on his horse's reins. Jeb Harkins was the local saloon owner, a man with a reputation for being overly persistent with women who caught his eye. "Miss Powell can take care of herself," Wade said, though his tone lacked conviction. Thornton shrugged. "If you say so." "Safe travels, Cooper." Wade stood in the street long after the sheriff had walked away, torn between his desire for freedom and an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Finally, with a muttered curse, he turned his horse around and headed toward the general store instead of the town limits. Later that afternoon, Wade knocked on the boarding house door, a package under his arm. Hannah answered, surprise evident on her face. "Mr. Cooper! I thought you might have left town. The children have been asking for you." Wade shifted uncomfortably. "I brought something for them," he said, handing her the package. Hannah unwrapped it to reveal a carved wooden horse for Thomas and a rag doll for Sarah. Her eyes softened. That's very thoughtful of you. It's nothing, Wade mumbled. I just thought. Well, after everything they'd been through. Would you like to come in? Mrs. Morgan made apple pie. Before Wade could answer, Sarah came running into the hallway. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she launched herself at his legs. Mr. Wade! You came back! Wade found himself smiling despite his best intentions. Hello, little one. I brought you something. Sarah's delight at the doll was immediate and vocal, drawing Thomas and eventually Mrs. Morgan into the hallway as well. Soon, Wade found himself ushered into the parlor, a slice of pie in front of him and Sarah perched on his knee, showing him all the things her doll could do. Looking around at the domestic scene, Wade felt a strange sensation as if he had stumbled into someone else's life by mistake. Yet it didn't feel wrong. If anything, it felt more right than anything had in years. 2 weeks later, Wade was still in Bighorn. He had taken a job at the livery stable, putting his knowledge of horses to good use. Each evening, he would join Hannah and the children for dinner at the boarding house, a routine that the townspeople had begun to notice and comment on. You know folks are talking, Mrs. Morgan said to him one day as he helped her carry in firewood. A single man spending so much time with a young, unmarried woman. Wade stiffened. Miss Powell and I are friends. She needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. Mrs. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Is that all it is, Mr. Cooper? Because I've seen the way you look at her when you think no one's watching. Wade had no answer for that. The truth was, his feelings for Hannah had grown beyond simple friendship or protective instinct. He admired her courage, her gentle strength, her unwavering devotion to her niece and nephew. But the idea of acknowledging these feelings terrified him more than any Sioux war party ever could. Hannah, for her part, had begun to build a life in Bighorn. She had taken a position as an assistant to the town's schoolteacher, her education in Boston proving valuable. The children were slowly adapting to their new reality, though Sarah still had nightmares and Thomas often asked for his mama. One evening, as Wade walked Hannah home from the school, she broached a subject they had both been avoiding. I've been thinking about the homestead, she said. Elizabeth and John had filed a claim. According to the bank, it's still valid. The property is legally mine now, as the children's guardian. Wade frowned. You're not thinking of going back there? Hannah sighed. Not immediately, no. But eventually. Wade, I can't live off Mrs. Morgan's charity forever. The teaching position barely covers our expenses. The homestead represents a future for the children land of their own. It's isolated, Wade argued. Vulnerable to attack. And after what happened there. I know, Hannah acknowledged. But with time, and perhaps some help, it could be made secure. A proper home. Wade was silent, processing the implications of her words. The thought of Hannah and the children returning to that remote homestead filled him with dread. I've saved some money, he said finally. Not much, but enough to maybe build you a small house here in town. Safer that way. Hannah stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. That's very generous, Wade. But why would you do that? Wade struggled to find the right words. I care about what happens to you. To the children. And how long would you stay to see what happens to us? Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Another week? A month? Until the wanderlust calls you away again? The question struck at the heart of Wade's inner conflict. I don't know, he admitted. I've never stayed anywhere long since the war. Hannah's eyes searched his face. Then perhaps it's better if we don't come to rely on you too much. With that, she continued walking, leaving Wade standing in the middle of the street, feeling as though he'd been punched in the gut. That night, Wade sat alone in his room above the saloon, a bottle of whiskey on the table before him. He hadn't taken a drink, though his fingers itched for the comfort of the bottle. Instead, he stared at his saddlebags, packed and ready for departure as they had been since his arrival in Bighorn. A knock at his door roused him from his thoughts. When he opened it, he was surprised to find Sheriff Thornton standing there. "Evening, Cooper. Mind if I come in?" Wade gestured him inside. Thornton noticed the untouched whiskey but made no comment. "Got word of a Sioux war party heading this way," the sheriff said without preamble. "Army patrol spotted them about a day's ride from here." Wade tensed. "You think they're the same ones who attacked the homestead?" "Could be. Either way, I'm organizing a town defense. Could use a man with your experience." Wade nodded. "I'll help." Thornton studied him. "Thought you might be long gone by now." Wade's jaw tightened. "I have my reasons for staying." "Those reasons wouldn't happen to include a certain green-eyed schoolteacher and her 2 young charges, would they?" When Wade didn't respond, Thornton continued. "Saw you two having what looked like a serious conversation earlier. Everything all right?" "She wants to go back to the homestead eventually," Wade said. "Fix it up, make a life there." Thornton whistled low. "Brave woman. Foolish, but brave. I offered to help her build a place in town instead." "And?" "She asked how long I'd stick around to see it through." Wade ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I couldn't give her an answer." Thornton was quiet for a moment. "You know, Cooper, I fought in the war too. Union side. Came west afterward, just like you. Drifted for a spell until I wound up here." "What made you stay?" Wade asked. "Found something worth staying for," Thornton replied simply. "Or someone, rather. My Margaret, God rest her soul, she was worth putting down roots for." Wade absorbed this. "I'm not sure I know how to put down roots anymore." "Sure you do," Thornton said. "You just gotta want it bad enough." He moved to the door. "Meeting at the town hall at dawn to organize patrols. Don't be late." After Thornton left, Wade sat for a long time, thinking about Hannah's question and his inability to answer it. The thought of leaving Bighorn, of leaving her, filled him with a hollowness he couldn't explain. But the thought of staying, of committing to one place and one person after so many years of freedom, was equally daunting. As dawn broke, Wade joined the other men at the town hall. Sheriff Thornton had organized them into patrols to guard the town perimeter and scout the surrounding area. Wade, with his military experience, was assigned to lead one of the scouting parties. Before heading out, Wade stopped by the boarding house to check on Hannah and the children. Mrs. Morgan answered the door, her face pinched with worry. "Mr. Cooper, thank goodness. Hannah's been asking for you." Wade found Hannah in the parlor, her face pale but composed as she read to the children. "Wade," she said, rising to meet him. "Sheriff Thornton was here earlier. He told us about the Sioux." Wade nodded. "I'm heading out with a scouting party. We'll try to intercept them before they reach town." Hannah's eyes widened with fear. "Be careful." "I always am," Wade assured her. He hesitated, then added, "About yesterday." Hannah shook her head. "Now's not the time. We can talk when you return." Wade knelt down to say goodbye to the children. Sarah clung to him fiercely. "You'll come back, won't you, Mr. Wade?" Wade met Hannah's gaze over the child's head. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'll come back." The scouting mission was tense but ultimately uneventful. The Sioux war party had indeed been spotted, but they appeared to be moving away from Bighorn, likely heading north toward the mountains. After a day of tracking, Wade and his party returned to town to report their findings. As Wade approached the boarding house that evening, he was surprised to see Hannah sitting alone on the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the evening chill. "The children?" he asked as he climbed the steps to join her. "Asleep," Hannah replied. "Mrs. Morgan is watching over them." She studied his face in the gathering darkness. "You look tired." Wade shrugged. "Long day in the saddle. Sheriff Thornton says the danger has passed." "For now," Wade agreed. "Though there's always danger out here." They sat in companionable silence for a few moments before Hannah spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about building a house in town." Wade tensed, unsure where the conversation was heading. It was a generous offer, Hannah continued. But I can't accept it. Wade's heart sank, though he tried not to show it. I understand. No, I don't think you do, Hannah said gently. I can't accept it because it would be wrong to let you build a future for us if you're not planning to be part of it. Wade looked at her sharply. What are you saying, Hannah? I'm saying that these past few weeks have shown me what it could be like to have you in our lives. The children adore you. Sarah asks for you every morning when she wakes up. Thomas follows you around like a shadow whenever you visit. And you? Wade asked, his voice rough. How do you feel about having me in your life? Hannah's cheeks colored, but she held his gaze. I think you know the answer to that, Wade Cooper. The question is, what do you want? Wade took a deep breath. For years, all I wanted was to keep moving. To outrun the memories, the guilt, the loss. But lately... He paused, gathering his courage. Lately, I've been thinking that maybe there's something to be said for staying in one place. For building something lasting. Hope flickered in Hannah's eyes. And what would that something be? A home, Wade said simply. A family. A life that means something. Hannah reached out and took his hand. Those things require commitment, Wade. They require putting down roots. Wade entwined his fingers with hers. I know. And if I'm being honest, the thought of it still scares me. But the thought of riding away from you and the children scares me more. Hannah's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then don't ride away. The next few months brought changes to Bighorn and to Wade Cooper's life that he could never have anticipated. With the help of townspeople, Wade and Hannah began rebuilding the homestead, this time with proper defenses, a sturdy fence, clear sight lines, and a more secure house. But they didn't move there immediately. Instead, Wade purchased a small house in town, large enough for Hannah, the children, and himself. Their wedding was a simple affair at the town church, with Sarah as flower girl and Thomas carrying the rings. Mrs. Morgan wept openly, and even Sheriff Thornton looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Never thought I'd see the day Wade Cooper settled down, Thornton remarked at the small reception afterward. Guess you found something worth staying for after all. Wade looked across the room at Hannah, radiant in her simple white dress, helping Sarah with a piece of cake. Someone, he corrected. I found someone worth staying for. 3 someones, actually. As spring turned to summer, Wade and Hannah divided their time between their house in town and the rebuilt homestead. Hannah continued teaching, while Wade worked with horses at the livery and gradually improved the homestead, determined to make it a safe and prosperous place for his new family. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their town house, Sarah came running up with a drawing she had made. Look, Papa Wade! She exclaimed, using the name she had adopted for him shortly after the wedding. It's our family! Wade examined the childish scrawl stick figures representing himself, Hannah, Sarah, and Thomas. In the background was a house that he recognized as the homestead. It's beautiful, darlin', he said, pulling the child onto his lap. You're quite the artist. Sarah beamed at the praise. Miss Harriet says I draw the best families in the whole school. Hannah, sitting beside them with Thomas dozing against her shoulder, smiled at the interaction. You certainly do, sweetheart. After Sarah had run off to show Mrs. Morgan her masterpiece, Hannah turned to Wade. You're good with them, she said softly. Better than you give yourself credit for. Wade shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise. They make it easy. They're good kids. They love you, Hannah said. We all do. Wade took her free hand in his. I never thought I'd have this, he admitted. After the war, I was so convinced I didn't deserve happiness, let alone a family. Everyone deserves a second chance, Wade, Hannah replied. Even wandering ex-Confederate soldiers with too many ghosts. Wade chuckled. Is that what I was? Among other things, Hannah teased. Her expression grew more serious. Are you happy, Wade? Truly? Wade thought about the question. He thought about the life he had led before the endless wandering, the lonely campfires, the temporary jobs and fleeting connections. Then he thought about his life now, the warmth of Hannah beside him each night, the children's laughter filling their home, the sense of purpose that came with building a future rather than running from the past. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he answered honestly. "You and the children, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" Hannah asked. "Hope," Wade said simply. "A reason to stay." As the sun set over Big Horn, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Wade Cooper reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. A chance encounter with a grieving woman and 2 frightened children had changed everything. The crying girl had said, "Please don't leave us." And against all his instincts, the cowboy had sat down and stayed. Now, years later, he had no regrets. The wanderer had found his home, the loner had found his family, and the man who once couldn't imagine staying in one place had built a life he would defend with his last breath. "What are you thinking about?" Hannah asked, noting his contemplative expression. Wade smiled and squeezed her hand. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best journeys are the ones that lead you right where you're supposed to be." As if to punctuate his words, Thomas stirred against Hannah's shoulder, opening sleepy eyes to look at Wade. The boy reached out a small hand, which Wade took without hesitation. "Story, Papa Wade?" Thomas asked hopefully. Wade chuckled. "All right, little man. One story, then bed." As Wade began spinning a tale about brave cowboys and the families they protected, he caught Hannah's eye over Thomas's head. The love he saw reflected there reaffirmed what he had come to know with absolute certainty. He had finally found where he belonged. The cowboy who had once been unable to answer the question of how long he would stay now knew the answer with unwavering conviction forever.